when you're doing astrophotography. Do you hate cables and you want to get rid of as many cables as possible? You don't want all of those DC cables, all of those USB cables, get rid of them. Do you also love ZWO equipment, so ZWO cameras, ZWO focuser, ZWO guide cameras, etc.? Do you love the ZWO ASI Air, which is ZWO's easy-to-use, simplified control center for all of your equipment that can control everything that you have in your rig, except that blue thing here, don't forget about this one for now. Are you a beginner in astrophotography and you're looking at the easiest way to get started in the most complete all-in-one package that is available? And are you sure that you'll never want to use any other control system than the ASI Air, such as a Windows PC with Nina? If the answer to all of those questions is yes, then this is for you. This is the ZWO ASI2600MC Air, and it is a camera that is not just a camera. It's a 3-in-1 piece of equipment, effectively. You have a cooled astrophotography camera with an APS-C size sensor, the very respectable Sony IMX571, basically the reference in the hobby at this stage. You have a secondary sensor that can be used for auto-guiding, that lets you keep track of your targets and be able to take long exposures of your targets when you're doing deep sky astrophotography. And within the camera body as well, you have an ASI Air, or more specifically, an ASI Air Mini. So you have the whole control center to control all of your equipment, and your camera has DC port inputs and outputs, and it has USB outputs as well, so that everything can be controlled from this single camera here. So let's have a quick look at what's inside. By the way, before I open this box, I want to say that this was sent to me by ZWO, but it is a review sample. I cannot keep it. I will have to send it back to them afterwards. And it in fact cost me money because I had to pay some import taxes on this camera. So I did not receive this product for free. But anyway, let's open the box, and the main camera is here. So this looks like a very standard camera. If I open the front, you can see that we do have indeed a main imaging sensor and then a guiding sensor on top of it. So this is exactly like the ZWO ASI2600MC Duo camera. But if we look at the back of the camera, things start to be different. We have DC input-output, so 12-volt DC. We have 4 USB ports, and we have an antenna there. And this thing will generate its own Wi-Fi, and also when you plug it in, it starts talking to you. I'm not even joking, there's a speaker in here. So you have this on the face of it. It's a camera, it's also a guide camera, and it's also a control center for all of your equipment, assuming all of your equipment is basically ZWO stuff, except DSLRs and mounts. In the box, we also have an antenna that we can affix on the camera. Here we are with the antenna, since it generates its own Wi-Fi, right? So when I say Wi-Fi, by the way, I don't mean an internet connection. This can work anywhere. You don't need internet connection for this to work. It just generates its own internet-less Wi-Fi hotspot that you can connect to with your smartphone or your tablet, even if you do not have internet connection and you're completely out of network coverage. Also in the package, we have the usual stuff like USB cables, DC cables, other DC cables, some more DC cables, and then the usual adapters that come with ZWO cameras, so you can achieve those 55mm of back focus that is often required. So with this, you really get the whole package, and as far as I understand, this is going to cost $2,000 US, which is the same price as the ZWO ASI2600MC Duo that I have here, that is basically the same thing as this, minus the ASI Air, so minus the control center component. So what's happening when I'm using a setup like this? I have a ZWO mount here, which is the ZWO AM5N, that has USB and DC 12-volt outputs on the saddle itself for cable management. I have a ZWO EAF. I have, just for show, a guide scope with a guide camera. Just pretend it's a ZWO guide camera, because otherwise it doesn't work. I have the main camera here, which is actually both a camera and a guider at the same time. And then hidden from view, I have a ZWO ASI Air. And you can see that this gives us a lot of cables. We have the cable from the guide camera, assume it's a ZWO camera, back to the camera hub. It could also go to the ASI Air Mini that I have here. We have the cable from the ZWO AEF back to the camera hub. We have the cable from the ASI Air to the camera. We have the power cable from the ASI Air to the camera. We have the power cable from the mount saddle, here it is, to the ASI Air to power everything. And then we have the same thing with the USB cable. So we do have quite a few cables. Now, when you go with the ZWO ASI2600MC Duo camera, because it has a guiding chip integrated, then you can get rid of this guide scope and guide camera. So immediately, that's one cable less, one piece of equipment less. So now I can remove the ASI Air Mini from this equipment because it's fully replaced by this. So let's have a quick look at the differences between the ASI Air Mini and the camera. The hardware inside, as far as I understand, is the same in both. But the ASI Air Mini has one DC input and 4 DC outputs, 2 on each side. Whereas the ZWO ASI2600MC Air only has 3 DC ports, which one will be used for input and the rest become output. So we have only 2 outputs compared to 4, but then because everything is a single camera body, it's likely that you do not need that many outputs anyway. And otherwise, we have the same USB-C USB port at the top that is used exclusively to get data off of the internal drive that is inside the camera. So the camera can store your images that you have taken, and you can take them off of the camera using the USB port or over network, over Wi-Fi network. And then you also have 4 USB ports that are USB 2.0, not USB 3.0, that are exactly the same as the ASI Air Mini. So it's really ZWO. They took the ZWO 2600MC Duo, they took the ASI Air, they smashed them together, and we get the ZWO ASI2600MC Air. It's a very, very interesting concept, and it has all of the advantages and the drawbacks of both the Duo and the ASI Air. I've done reviews on both on the channel. The main camera sensor, it's amazing, it will work great, there's no doubt about it. The secondary sensor that you have on top of it, it will work great with broadband imaging, but it will start to struggle to some extent with very narrowband imaging. So if you're using like 3 nanometer, 4 nanometer band passes, then you might have some struggles guiding, especially with longer focal length telescopes compared to something like the RedCat 51 that I'm using for my setup here. So this is a drawback that is pre-existing with the 2600MC Duo and is inherited as is by the Air. It's also a huge advantage, of course, because you do not need a guide scope, you do not need an off-axis guider, everything is in camera, and it's been done by other brands a long time ago, like SBIG, for instance. This wasn't invented by ZWO, but it's a successful implementation of that same concept. And then the same thing can be said of the ASI Air. The ASI Air is an amazing piece of equipment that has those DC inputs and outputs, those USB outputs, and then an excellent smartphone interface that lets you control all of your equipment, assuming your electronic focuser is ZWO, assuming you're not using a rotator because there's no rotator from ZWO yet. But with those assumptions out of the way, it's a great imaging system overall. There are limitations that I would like to see that I have access to in more advanced software like Nina, but that's almost at the level of details. Again, I have like millions of videos about the ASI Air. I'll put some links down below if you're interested in having a look. But basically you get both the best of both worlds, but also the drawbacks of both worlds at the same time. Now let me put it on my RedCat 51 here to show you how it looks like with this camera on a real rig. And here is how it looks like overall. We have one cable that provides power to the ZWO M5N. We have the DC output on the saddle that can provide power to the 2600MC Air, and I'm plugging it in, and in a moment we'll hear a voice telling us it's ready to connect. We have also the USB input on the saddle of the mount that we can connect to a USB port. and then we have a single USB cable to the ZWO AEF. So we have what? The power cable to the mount.
Powering on, waiting for connection.
I hope you could hear that. It said powering on, ready for connection. But yes, going back, we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 cables. That's it. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you hate cables and you like well-integrated systems and you like ZWO, then this could be for you. And once it has told us with voice that we can connect to it, I can just launch the ASI Air app, just like always, from my phone, and then I can choose my mount. I can choose my main camera and guide cameras, which are both like within this this whole body here. The EF has been detected automatically, and then I can enter as usual, and it just works. And things work just as expected. It's just like the normal ASI Air. I have access to my camera gain. I can set the camera temperature. I can take an exposure, let's say 1 second exposure, and see how it looks like. And it will work, you know, as if it was. It's basically the same setup that I had just a moment ago, except I have fewer cables and everything is in a single body. And we can see there's my first exposure, 1 second long with the camera. It's just working. It's kind of magic. Okay, we're having a somewhat clear night, and so I can test out the 2600MC Air under the stars and show you how it's controlled and how it controls the rest of your equipment. And for anyone using the ASI Air, it's not going to be a surprise. It's basically the same thing. But if you haven't used the ASI Air in the past, or you're new to the hobby and you're wondering how the heck this all works, well, the control center that's in the camera is going to control my mount here, which is not a ZWO mount. This is the UMI 17 Lite from Proxy Sky. By the way, I'll have the links to the equipment down in the description. And then I also have an electronic focuser here that is connected to my Red Cat telescope. The electronic focuser has to be the EAF because only the ZWO AEF can work with the ASI Air or the 2600MC Air. So if you wanted to save some money by buying something like the Gemini EF, that's not going to work. You have to get the ZWO version. So effectively, the camera is connected via USB to the mount. It's also going to power the mount via its DC output. Not sure if that's going to work, but probably not recommended, but we're going to try it. It's also going to power the focuser via USB, and that's pretty much it. That's where you can have a very simple, very clean setup like the one I have here. It's on a terrible tripod, but it's a very portable tripod, by the way. So that's why it's going to be my grab and go kind of equipment until I have to return it to ZWO. All of this I'm powering via my Apertura 12-volt battery, and so that is the whole setup. I also have, by the way, a narrowband filter, an H-alpha oxygen-3 filter inside the Red Cat 51, because this is Tokyo. It's a very light polluted area, and so using narrowband filters can help with the light pollution quite a lot. Once you're connected to the Wi-Fi emitted by the camera, you can launch the ASI Air app to control it. I have it launched right now, and you see I have my mount selected as on step because that's the right driver for this specific mount, and the main camera is the 2600MC Air, this camera, and the guide camera, which is also integrated within that 2600MC Air, is the 220mm Air. It's inside, and then we have the EF, the autofocuser that has been detected automatically. So I can just enter the main interface and you can see here we are. The camera has, of course, an active cooling solution, and you can see it's already starting to cool it down. I can go to the camera options here to see what is my gain of the camera. For this camera, by the way, I recommend setting the gain of M because that's where you have the best compromise between read noise and dynamic range. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, it's fine. Just as a starting point, use M or gain 100, and it's going to work well for you. And I've set the cooling to -10 degrees here. This is a bit too aggressive for this weather. So I'm going to cool the sensor to -5 degrees Celsius. I can also put it as a keyboard, probably easier that way. And we have the anti-dew on as well within the camera. I can also check that my guide chip that is also inside the camera has been connected properly. And then the EEF is also connected properly. Okay, so now let's try to take one exposure, 5-second exposures. Normally my scope is actually fairly well in focus, so we should be seeing some stars. and it is downloading the image from the camera. And you can see we see some stars, but they're a bit out of focus, so we're going to try to remedy that. And now I can use the focuser here, the focuser tab, and say like, let's try to go in one direction, see if the focus is better or worse, right? So you can control everything really from the control center that is within the camera. The focus is actually much better now. I see a lot of stars, so we are doing well. And now I can also do some quick polar alignment because I have just plopped down this mount and we need to polar align it to the celestial North Pole for me. So for that, I can go into the functions, right? We have tons of functions, and I can go to polar alignment. And we're just going to probably put an exposure of 3 seconds and click play. What it will do, it will take exposures and it will move the mount automatically, triangulate where the celestial North Pole is supposed to be. Now you can see all on its own, it is moving the mount like that to do this kind of triangulation of the celestial North Pole. So that's where, this camera basically controls everything as long as it is compatible. So electronic focuser, electronic filter wheel have to be ZWO. And if you want to use a different guide camera than the one that's inside the camera body, you have to use a ZWO guide camera in that case. But then because the camera has everything integrated, it's not such a limitation as it is with the standard ASI Air. And you can see the polar alignment has been kind of computed, and I can now adjust the mount to follow what the ASI Air is telling me, what the camera is telling me effectively. And within a few minutes, I'm able to do my polar alignment, and we're within one arc minute of the pole, which is more than enough, right? So when we're done with the polar alignment, we can use the search feature to find a target. Like we have a list of cute targets that are available. We could also be using the Sky Atlas at the bottom left here to see what's in the sky. Right now it's pointing at the North America nebula. Let's say I could search for something like the Dumbbell Nebula, so M27 for instance. So I can go ahead, search for M27 and tap on it and say go to. And the camera will control the mount, tell it to slew to that. You can see the mount is moving to follow that. And then it will take an exposure, look at the stars that are in the frame, and based on the stars that it sees, it will detect whether it's well centered or not. If it's not, it will push the mount to go like to the right direction, try again until the target is well centered. And there you can see that's what's happening right now. The blue rectangle is basically where the mount is actually pointed, and the red rectangle is the target. And there we go, the target is centered, so we can have a look by taking an exposure. And here we go, at the center of the field of view, we can see the Dumbbell Nebula, and we can also see we're not quite well in focus, but I can play with the focuser, or we can even do some autofocus. Okay, and the autofocus is complete. It worked really well. We're now at best focus. We can double check how it looked like, and yes, this is much better focused. Everything is going well, right? And now that we're on target, we can also tap this menu there. This is to guide, to keep track of the target, to make sure that our exposures will not have star trails, and that uses the secondary sensor that is within this camera. I can loop my exposures, and then on tapping that little icon there, I can let the ASI Air within the camera, so the brain of the camera, basically guide on its own without me having to do anything. While it's doing that, I can get ready for an auto run. So we can go to this menu here, and yes, we're going to take an image of M27, and we can say that once it's done, we'll want the mount to be returned to its own home position. And I can say like, yeah, we're going to take an exposure of 300 seconds, and we're going to take the gain of 100. There it is. Repeat that, let's say 70 times. That should hold us until the morning, and validate that. And now we're ready to actually take images of this particular target. Now you can see while we were doing that, the guiding has started, and we are now guiding based on the stars using the secondary sensor that is on the camera. Now that we're ready, like everything is ready, I can actually just start the auto run by clicking the play button. And that's all there is to it. And so now I'll start the auto run, let it run throughout the night. Hopefully we keep having clear skies and we'll see what the end result is. And so here we have the ASI Air, the control center that is within the camera that can control everything, your mount, the camera, the guide camera that's inside the camera as well, the focuser, filter wheel, etc. And it lets you save on cables compared to having a ZWO ASI2600MC Duo or some other camera without a guide chip integrated and a separate ASI Air. But how well does it work on something like a PC? Because this is something to be taken into account. This camera, really the main principle of it, the main thought within it is that you're going to be using it as a smart camera. And that's the primary scenario. It's not made as a primary scenario for controlling with your PC, even though it is possible to some extent. And we'll have a look now. Oh, and by the way, if you want to see the results of this used with a PC, you should like the video. It really helps the channel out. And while you're on your way, you could also leave a comment. Let us know what you think of this camera. Is it bonkers and completely useless, or is it a revolution, or something in between? Probably something in between, but let us know down in the comments. If you want to support this channel at no cost to you and you're planning on buying anything from Amazon, Agena, First Light Optics, High Point Scientific, ZWO, including this camera, if you do so after clicking the links that I have down in the description, it will help me out at no cost to you. If you want to help more directly and support all of the work that I put into this channel, you can join my Patreon as a supporter. The link is down in the description, or you can join the channel as a member using the join button. You guys, you truly make the channel possible. All of the audiovisual equipment that I'm using for making those videos, including the editing software, I bought it thanks to your contributions. So I'm currently connected to my PC with Nina already launched, and my PC is connected to my home Wi-Fi network. As well, I've set the ASI Air within this camera to also connect to my home network. And if I go to the camera drop-down menu, automatically under ASCOM Alpaca, I see both cameras available, the main camera, which is the 2600MC, and then the guide camera chip, which is the 220 here. And I can connect to one. So let's connect to the 2600MC camera, which is the main imaging camera, and you can see we have information like the sensor temperature. At the same time, the gain is from 0 to 4. There's no mention of where there is a conversion between low gain conversion and high gain conversion, so I'm not exactly sure what to choose. I could say 0, and also apparently I can change the offset. The pixel size also isn't reported, which is not great for things like field of view. You'll have to put it in manually. But I can go to my imaging tab and I can take an exposure and it's going to work. But it's going to take quite a bit of time. And it takes a bit of time regardless of whether I'm in station modes, as I am now, or if I'm connected wirelessly directly to the camera. And you can see as I'm talking, we've been taking that 1 second exposure and now it's downloading from the camera, and we can wait and wait and wait until it becomes available. Let's give it a moment. Hopefully it will, my 1 second exposure will work for the purpose of this video. Yes, looks like we're there. Looks like we're there. And here we are. We have our exposure. And as you can see, it's been a bit laborious. At the same time, using the camera with PHD2 was not as easy because PHD2 did not detect the Alpaca devices on the network directly. I had to jump through hoops with the ASCOM chooser to make them available, but they work. But there's a but, because let me show you. So I'm going to have my equipment tab open on Nina. You can see the ASI Air the ASI2600MC sensor is connected. Now I can open PHD2, and under PHD2 I can choose the ASI220mm Air. Again, I had to kind of jump through hoops to make that appear, but it works and I can connect to it, hopefully, fingers crossed. Camera connected. Notice that the moment the camera connected, this one in Nina stopped. It no longer works. So it seems like I'm unable to use both cameras at once. And as you'll see, when I loop on the 220 sensor, it works. We can see it works in PHD2, but despite 1 second exposures from one frame to the next, it is quite slow. It's several seconds. So if you are thinking ever of using this camera with a PC, you would have been much better off buying the ZWO camera and the ASI Air separately rather than going with this. Also, the EEF connected to the camera, it's not available from my PC. Whereas it would be if it had been connected to the ZWO camera with the USB output. So if you do buy this camera, this is something to be aware of. It's very ASI Air centric. So I've had several imaging nights with the 2600MC Air by ZWO, and overall it went without a hitch. I just, exactly as I showed you in the video each time, it just works. It's a very good system overall as a smart camera. And I can show you some of the results. So the first night I actually managed to get 43 exposures before the clouds rolled in on M27, the Dumbbell Nebula. And each of them is 5 minutes long, and it was through a 5 nanometer bandpass dual band narrowband filter for H-alpha and oxygen 3. And here we have the result. This is the result of the raw stack straight out of the camera. We have M27 in the middle. It's there, it's 43 exposures of 5 minutes, so it's not a long integration time, but we can see it. We can also see this little tiny planetary nebula there. It is visible in this humongous field of view, and you can see one of the really cool things about this sensor is that it is APS-C size, so you do get a really good field of view, especially with a small refractor like here. The pixel size is 3.76 micrometers, which is a good compromise typically for our equipment these days, and the IMX571 sensor is overall a reference in the hobby, although, as has been noted by Deep Sky Detail, it doesn't have as much quantum efficiency in H-alpha and sulfur 2 as we could wish for. But still, it's basically the reference these days in the hobby. Now, after seeing that, I just spent like really 5 minutes processing this image. You see the processed image looks very similar, except that now the background has been extracted. The image is non-linear, and we can see again M27. We have the corkscrew structure, we have the lobes, we have everything is visible in this single night, or half a night actually, of imaging. And I really like the result that I'm getting, and it is exactly as I expected. It's exactly like the other IMX571 based cameras that I've used from Taupe Tech, from ZWO as well. No surprise there whatsoever. And I also did 2 more nights of imaging, this time on the North American Nebula, and I managed to get 110 5-minute-second exposure, still with the same H-alpha oxygen 3 filter. This is the result straight out of the camera. Again, I love this kind of field of view because we see the whole nebula in one shot, no need to do a mosaic, nothing like that. And this is straight stack after an automated dynamic background extraction. This is what we get, and then my final process was basically this. This is what I get from my final process. I really love this nebula because it looks like we're really opening a veil in the darkness of space, and then we peer into this shockingly blue area. I love this, absolutely love this. And we can see all of the details. We have the Pelican Nebula here, we have the wall, we have everything from the North American Nebula, and I really, really like this overall field of view and this overall result. But again, I'm not surprised. It's an IMX571 sensor-based camera. That's excellent. And in terms of the use that I had throughout the nights of using this camera via the smartphone app, I never imaged from the PC due to the limitations that I've shown earlier. It works great. The ASI Air control system, it's, in my opinion, still not as good as Nina, but then I'm not objective because I'm a big user of Nina and I've been a code contributor to Nina as well. But it's an excellent way to get started in the hobby. The feeling that I had with controlling the camera, everything is honestly really well built into the system. It's easy to get started, it's easy to get the guiding going, it's easy to get the exposures going, it's easy to do an auto run, even schedules are easy. I even saw that there's a way to stack your images directly in camera or in ASI Air, and it actually worked. It's a lot of cool features with the limitation, obviously, that since you've bought this camera that has the ASI Air integrated, you will likely want an electronic focuser, you can only buy the electronic focuser from ZW. You cannot buy the TubeTech AEF, that's cheaper. You cannot buy the Gemini EF, that is much cheaper. You have to go with the ZW EF. But in a way, I feel less bad about this than the standalone ASI Air, because when you buy this, at the same time you're buying the ASI Air, you're buying a ZW guide camera, and you're buying a ZW main camera. So it's like part of the package. Like, you're using ZW equipment by buying this. You're buying 3 pieces of equipment in one. They're all ZW. The only thing you now need to worry about is the mount. And as we can see, this is not a ZW mount, and yet it works because most mounts are supported by the ASI Air system. And then the only thing that sticks out is electronic filter wheel if you need one, electronic focuser if you need one, and then in the future, electronic rotator if you need one. You need to buy those from ZW, and the electronic rotator does not yet exist from ZW. There are some alternatives from Deep Sky DAD, but as far as I can tell, they rely on workarounds. And with the limited number of power ports on this camera, I'm not sure it's going to be practical with this particular camera. And again, the ASI Air control system I think is excellent. It doesn't have as many features as Nina that I actually use, but it still works very well. I'm also miffed that it's such a closed ecosystem despite relying extremely heavily on open source software. But as a product itself, this is excellent if you use it as a smart camera. If you're going to use it as from a PC, then don't go with that. Just go with the ZWO ASI2600MC Duo instead, because then you have full control of it from a PC and none of the issues that I saw with this. It's possible that they are going to update the firmware to make the PC driver work better and better, but as it is right now, I would not be using this camera from a PC. In fact, I haven't. I really stuck to the smart control system, the ASI Air itself, which again works really, really well. Oh, I should also note that I tested the cooling performance with this. In a temperature controlled room that was set at 30 degrees Celsius, I managed to get it down to -8 degrees Celsius. So it managed 38 degrees below ambient temperature, which is pretty good. So in the end, should you buy this camera? If you're a beginner in the hobby and you're wanting a camera that does everything, including controlling your equipment, then yes, this is a very good choice. You do have to realize that you are indeed restricting yourself to ZW equipment and restricting yourself to the ASI Air control center. If in the future you wanted to change to a PC with PC control software, which does have more features, then it would be more practical to actually change the camera than to keep using this. So this is something to really keep in mind in terms of future usage of the camera. So if you're thinking like, yeah, maybe in the future I will not use the ASI Air part of this anymore, I might go to PC in the future, then the ASI2600MC Duo with a separate ASI Air for the time being probably makes a lot more sense. If you're already into astrophotography and you already have all of the equipment and you have a rig working, but you're looking for, I don't know, a portable rig, you want to have as few cables as possible, you want to have it as streamlined as possible, I think this is also a great choice. In fact, I think it's almost like made for such a rig. It makes me want to just take it with me when traveling and just use this whole setup here when I'm going to travel. And that's basically it. This is a cross of a guide camera, of a main camera, and of the ASI Air that just got smashed together, and they have exactly the same huge advantages and the same limitations. And whether you want to go for it or not, it really is up to you. I think also with the ZWO AM5 that has through the mount cabling, it was a really good match as well in terms of cable management. So if you're going all ZWO, this is a great option. If you're not sure about all ZWO or using the ASI Air system long term, then something else might be better for you. But again, as it is, I think it's an excellent camera. I had a lot of fun with it and it's working really, really well with the ASI Air app on my smartphone. What are What are your thoughts? Let us know down in the comments while you're going there. Please like the video. It really helps the channel out. If you want to help out even more and you're planning on buying anything, including this camera, I'll have the links to everything that I used in this video down in the description. If you buy anything after clicking one of my links down below, whether it's Amazon or Agena Astro or High Point Scientific, etc., then you will help me out. I'll get a small tiny commission at no cost to you. And if you want to help more directly, because obviously this channel is a lot of work and you want to sponsor the channel directly, then you can join my channel as a Patreon member. The link is down in the description, or as a channel member using the join button right next to the subscribe button. Talking about the subscribe button, if you're new to the channel and you like astrophotography, you like gear reviews, you like tutorials, you like in-depth explanations about noise and images and that kind of stuff, then you may want to consider subscribing to this channel, in which case, welcome to the channel. I'd like again to thank so much my Patreon supporters and channel members for your support. Because this is a long video, your name will be at the end of the video together with a nicely zooming in image of that North American nebula that I took with exactly this setup here. With that, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was interesting and that you learned something. As always, don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.